Chairman. And Secretary Sullivan, as I told you in our meeting, I appreciate your willingness to serve in a new and very important job that's going to be extremely difficult because you're going to be dealing with a relationship that's fraught with problems. You talked about some of those earlier today. You talked about their interference in our elections and how strongly we feel about their malign activities, Russia's malign activities around the world, the cyber attacks, certainly what's going on in terms of disinformation, which I want to talk to you about in a second. As you know, I spent a lot of time on the Ukraine issue. You mentioned Georgia, Ukraine. We didn't talk much about Syria, but even today as we sit here, there's the potential for U.S. forces and Russian forces to be in conflict for the first time in many years. So there's lots going on. Having served in 3 administrations now, you've got the background and experience to be able to handle it, I believe. So I'm glad you're willing to do it. I'm going to assume for the purposes of my questions that you'll get through this process as you have in the past, and that, as I've seen this morning, you'll be able to answer the questions that are raised by my colleagues in a way that will ensure that you are confirmed. I think there are 3 areas where you can play a particularly significant role. One is with regard to disinformation. The Global Engagement Center, you have been a champion of, I appreciate that. Senator Murphy and I passed legislation a few years ago that we've been trying to ensure ends up being implemented properly, including the funding. Senator Cardin just talked about that, the DOD funding, which we finally got over to the State Department. This is not just focused on Russia, it's focused on disinformation more broadly, but frankly, Russia is the #1 actor in this space. So let me ask you, from your perch in Moscow, will you continue to be an advocate for the Global Engagement Center, and can you help us to ensure that we don't have these glitches, that we have the funding at a stable level so that we can bring the expertise in to be able to push back on disinformation globally?
Absolutely, Senator. In fact, we spoke at my confirmation hearing 2.5 years ago. You may not remember this, but about the Global Engagement Center.
Well, I remember it. You were,
yes.
At that time, you made commitments that you kept,
and
which I appreciate.
But what the challenge we've had with the GEC has been that it was when it was originally created, it was focused on counting non-state actors, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, for example, shifting to continuing that mission, but adding state actors, specifically one as sophisticated as Russia, has made the job even more difficult, but just as, if not more so, necessary. And I appreciate this committee's help in seeking to get that funding, which has taken us far too long to get.
Second, so thank you. And I think you will have a unique opportunity, given your position. I believe you're going to be confirmed for to be able to speak to that. Second is Ukraine. And as you and I have talked about, I've been there several times. I went there right after the Revolution of Dignity and the Maidan, and since then, members of this committee have supported over $3 billion in additional aid to Ukraine, including now lethal defensive aid, which is necessary, and now a lot of Americans know about that as well, given what's happened in the last couple months. The point is, it's an extremely sensitive time in Ukraine. President Zelensky has told me, and he has taken some rather courageous political actions to fulfill this, that he would like to see the conflict in the Donbass resolved. He specifically has talked about the Steinmeier formula, withdrawal of the Russian forces from the border areas, withdrawal of the Russian-backed surrogate forces there, in exchange for elections in the East and in exchange for some level of autonomy. He's gotten a lot of pushback from that, as you know. But the point I'm making is, I think you, having had your experiences at the State Department, understanding this issue more broadly, have an interesting role to play, which is to get Russia to the table in a good faith effort, which I have not seen yet, both with regard to Crimea, which we must never forget, and with regard to the eastern border. I think there is an opportunity here with the new administration, with his majority in his parliament, the Rada, and with his determination to try to figure out a way forward. Are you willing to take on that role, which would not be the typical role of an ambassador, but I think in your case it would be one that could be crucial, again, to getting Russia to the table in a way that this issue could be resolved?
Well, thank you, Senator. Russia is the key actor in this whole drama. We have the situation we have in the Donbass and in Crimea solely because of Russia's actions. I thought we saw a little shift in the Russian position a few months ago when they agreed to the prisoner exchange to release the Kerch Strait sailors, the Ukrainian sailors that they had illegally attacked and seized. But I think there hasn't been the follow-through that we were hoping for. I would expect that the U.S. ambassador to Russia would be involved, in particular, in engaging with the Russian government in coordination with colleagues at the Department of State and at the NSC on this extremely important issue.
Yeah, again, my time has expired. We'll continue this dialogue, but you will have the opportunity to play a central role in this because of your experience at the NSC and at the State Department and at the White House and the network you've developed and the respect you have here on the Hill. So I hope you will use that aggressively to be able to resolve some of these issues, particularly with regard to the eastern border of Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Shaheen.